Hello, welcome to today's episode of Juice to the Numbers, your movies and TV podcast. I am your host, Joshua Tracy.
And I'm Roger Ebert. I just said
And I'm
boxer.
George Siskel. And if you don't get that reference, or if I got the names wrong, fuck you. So, as we did last week, we will be doing again this week, and this will probably be the last week I preface with it, since there's no sports going on in the world right now. Corwin and I have converted the Monday edition of this podcast into a TV and movies podcast, although we have yet to talk about any television shows. Maybe we can later. But anyway, so we've each watched, we both watched a couple more movies this week, and we're going to talk about them. You ready, Corwin?
Yeah.
All right, so which one did you watch first?
I watched Death of Stalin probably 4 days ago. I probably watched it the night we recorded the last episode of the podcast, and I watched The Shining 3 hours ago.
All right, then you know what? Let's start with The Shining, since it's fresh in your mind, and I've seen it a bunch of times, so it's easier.
Yeah, this was my first time watching this.
Which
This is why I chose it.
crazy, but also awesome, because it gives us a chance to
Mhm.
tap into a fresh opinion. The Shining was a 1980 movie made by Stanley Kubrick, written for the screen by Stanley Kubrick, based off of a Stephen King novel. This film stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Dan Lloyd, and my man Scatman Crothers.
So the first opinion I had of this movie was seeing the opening credits, seeing his name, and going, oh my God, Josh will know exactly who this person is, and this is the perfect name for us. Like this is such an 80 grade baseball name that I knew right off the bat you were just gonna love this guy.
Oh my God, I live for Scatman Crothers' name. It's an amazing name. I mean, Scat, it's just perfect. It's
So,
perfect.
Today is Easter, and we had Easter dinner with my family, and I finished up the movie, 5 minutes before we sat down for dinner. So, we were talking about it a little bit. Both my parents were taken aback that I had never seen it before. And the first thing my dad said was, when I brought up that I watched The Shining, was, "Oh, Scatman Crothers?" And I was like, that is, like, you are not someone to know names or to know actors and all that outside of, like, your very small circle of influence. I was just put on my ass for the fact that he had Scatman Crothers' name just on the tip of his tongue, ready to go. Yeah, just loaded in the chamber.
It's just, how do you forget that name? His name is Scat. Well, it's not his actual name, but like his nickname, the name he goes by, the name that is literally accredited to him at the beginning of the film is Scatman Crothers. It's perfect. It's perfect. Anyway,
I love the character too.
Yeah, honestly, and the thing is, he's like a good actor. It's not like it's some wonky, weird, bizarro person. He's like, he really kills it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
spoilers. His death was probably the biggest shock throughout the entire movie.
Came
just out of
nowhere.
Like, I knew he was going to die the second he got out of that snow machine, but just the shock of just a full 500-foot home run swing, just with an axe, just right into his fucking chest, just out of nowhere.
I guess we should say we'll be spoiling both of these movies, because how the fuck do you talk about them without? Although on the one hand, The Shining is 40 years old. Tough to spoil. With an even older book, and Death of Stalin has been out for a few years. So
if you get upset with us for spoiling a movie that came out 20 years before I was born, well, all right, 17 years before I was born, stop listening. Just, we don't have time for your issues.
We don't have time for you at all. The movie had a projected cost of $19 million and made at the box office $45.7 million. A roaring success. Yeah. So it also has no Oscars nominations, which is kind of interesting. I know horror is kind of a relatively lesser represented genre at the Oscars, but there's precedent for it. Like with the what's that William Friedkin one, The Exorcist, and this movie has at least two big marquee names under its belt with Stanley Kubrick, who is an Academy darling of sorts, and Jack
Mhm.
Nicholson, who is tied for having the most Oscars for a actor in a leading role of for any actor ever. So it's interesting it never got any. It didn't get any love at all. But what
That
was
is just ass backwards to me. I thought Jack Nicklaus's role was the shining star of this movie. Like we'll go into more into my feelings towards this, as we get through this episode, but that like my biggest takeaway was Jack Nicholas just killed it with this role, and part of it may be the fact that I kind of felt like he was just being himself and just letting loose, but again, that's up for further discussion, but he was far and away my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, this is also like peak Jack Nicholson for doing
Mhm.
what he was. For reference, the 1981 Academy Award winners for Best Actor, which is the category that Jack Nicholson would have been in, uh, the winner that year was Robert De Niro for Raging Bull, which makes sense.
Yeah.
The other nominees were John Hurt for The Elephant Man, who, goddamn, that movie was amazing. Robert Duvall for The Great Santini, Jack Lemmon for Tribute, Peter O'Toole for The Stuntman. So that is that's a tough category right there.
I
Um,
might give Jack Nicholson the win over De Niro and Raging Bull.
it's so tough because those are like two classic movies we're talking about
Right.
here.
But the fact that he wasn't even nominated is
Tough.
bullshit. Is bullshit in the most
Well,
refined form.
what's really bullshit is the Best Picture category that year, which is a rough category for like if you look back at history, because usually there's always a better movie in the nominations than there is for the winner. So I'll give you the nominees for that year, and I want you to pick the winner. The nominees in the 1981 Best Picture category: Raging Bull, The Elephant Man, The Coal Miner's Daughter, Ordinary People, and Tess.
I would personally pick Raging Bull.
Of course,
I feel like Elephant Man won.
neither. It was Ordinary People.
Oh god.
And I don't know if you've seen Ordinary People. I have seen Ordinary People because I tried. I've tried over the years to watch all the Best Picture nominees I could, and it is a good movie. But I mean, goddamn, Raging Bull, Elephant Man, and Coal Miner's Daughter are all better movies. And
I
I'm not even
mean,
like a huge Coal Miner Daughters fan.
don't get me wrong, like Raging Bull is not close to being my favorite film by either De Niro or who directed it? Spielberg?
Raging Bull? No, it was Scorsese.
Oh god. Yeah, definitely not up there for Martin Scorsese or Robert De Niro. I kind of wasn't a fan of it, but I will fully admit that it is a better movie than Ordinary People.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
Ordinary.
you know what? You know what my thought process was right there?
What?
I know Steven Spielberg directed that black and white movie, Schindler's List. So clearly, this black and white movie had to also be fucking Spielberg.
Yeah, yeah, I see how you
I
can
amaze
get there.
myself with my brain sometimes.
All right, so what was your first impression of this film? Since this is your first time watching it, what are some of the main takeaways you took from it?
I thought a lot of the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the supernatural elements were just I get that that was a driving force behind what was going on in the movie. I didn't really feel like it added too much to the narrative. I felt like, okay, this is on an Indian burial ground. Sure.
Which of course it
That's
is.
yeah, like that's just classic easy trope to have. Um, but there was no real reasoning behind why anything specific was happening. And while I get that very easily could have been the point that Kubrick was making and was a factor in why this movie was as effective as it was, in 1980, it didn't do it for me. It's I like to have, it doesn't need to be straightforward narrative, but I'd like to be able to make sense of it at either the end of the movie or with some added reference material. And I just felt like there was a lacking overall connection between all of it, which, I very easily could say that I am in the wrong here. Well, maybe not in the wrong, but am missing a major point that Kubrick was trying to portray. But it's just, it didn't do it for me the way it does it for, both of my parents and so many other people that just adore this movie. Yeah, it wasn't there.
So I am a big fan of this movie, as I'm a big fan of like damn near every Kubrick film. Did you read the book?
I didn't. I didn't read the book.
I have. It's been a long ass time, so I'm gonna be troubled to recall too much of it. But the book shed some additional light, as well as some background on the book itself. So this film, well, again, this book is meant to be representative of Stephen King and his battle against his own alcoholism,
Hmm.
and with Jack Torrance representing him and the evil forces that are trying to kind of take possession of him being, again, representative of Stephen King's alcoholism. So if you think about it from that perspective, if you add that context, maybe I think it becomes a little bit more clear, or it can at least give a little bit more guidance to what is the story is doing. On the other
Well,
hand, one of the things I think makes the abstractness of a lot of what happens work is that Jack, as he goes through, it's his descent into madness and
mhm.
his susceptibility to what's going on. And it kind of slowly creeps up on him from certain different weird ways. And he's come to just either accept or embrace and not really give too much thought about anymore. And his eventual acceptance and conversion into the mode of thinking that the sentient body that is the hotel starts to lend itself to is that's how he eventually goes down the hole that he goes down.
Mhm. I so subjectively, the supernatural stuff is a big gripe for me, and that was my biggest takeaway. Objectively, Jack's descent into madness, um, I thought was I don't want to say poorly acted, but poorly portrayed. Because from the first scene he is in, immediately it was like, oh, this guy is already off some deep end. He is clearly, not well mentally and is just, it's been 40 years since this came out. I've grown up with people talking about this movie. I knew where the movie was going, and overall plot point, but there was no hiding the fact that Jack Torrance was going to go crazy at any point in this movie.
Oh yeah,
And
no, the
reading
literal
in
first note I have in my notebook is Jack Nicholson is creepy off the bat.
yeah, but being creepy but being normal is one thing. I just felt like there is no hiding the twist of this deep dive into his own, whether it be alcoholism or just this mental instability. I just feel like it was laid bare just from scene one. Like that interview scene, uh, you can tell he is not a well put together human being. And it didn't really just translate well to, in my mind, a good story arc because you could see it coming 3 miles away. And I was reading into, how Stephen King reacted to this movie
Oh, he
when
hated
it
it.
came out. And yeah, that was one of his biggest gripes among many was that you picked a guy like Jack Nicholas. Yeah, of course he's going to go crazy. He's a fucking psychopath in real life, let alone in his acting, especially coming off One Flew Up Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Everyone could kind of see that coming. And that was kind of all right, I get that they were trying to show this dive into madness, but compared to my personal favorite movie, Apocalypse Now, I thought that is on just a whole nother mountain compared to this showing the collapse of someone's mental state.
Part of the problem I think that you're getting at here is that there's a lot that happens in the book. And obviously,
But
with a book, you have more room to take your time. Whereas with all of the things that happen in a movie, there just isn't necessary. And this movie is already long. It's already 2 hours
two
and
hours,
50
20
minutes.
minutes.
20 minutes. Yeah. So like I think you're right. Like Jack Nicholson, as again, my first note is here. Jack Nicholson is creepy off the bat. He is. He is an unhinged character from the jump, which I don't particularly mind as much. I can see why you would have that complaint. But I think it might just be born out of the fact that one, Kubrick was clearly heavy-handed.
Mm.
As Shelley Duvall is also unhinged. Like she looks frail as fuck from the moment go. Um,
Hmm.
but I think it might also just be because you got to move it forward. And there's some scenes
Yeah.
from the book that are missing in the movie that I would have loved to see in this movie. Um, one of an early moment that is the first one of the first things that leads Wendy, Shelley Duvall's character, to question how things are at the hotel is you know what topiary is? Big,
Hmm.
bushes and trees shaped to look like animals or objects or whatever. The hotel's supposed to have animal shaped topiary, and in the book, like it continually is moving around, and like Wendy looks away and she looks back over, and the topiary is shifted, and then as the book progresses, it starts looking at her. You know,
Hmm.
there's a really really great scene where after one of the big snowfalls, when the snow is like several feet deep, Danny gets like digs this like little tunnel system in the snow, and he's just like kind of working his way around his little tunnel, and he like feels something behind him, and like he's like starting to scramble to get out, but he's too low down. He can't tunnel straight upwards, so he has to like go back through his tunnel, and there's not enough room for him to like turn around to see what's behind him, but he feels like there's something there, and he like
Now that's terrifying.
oh yeah, absolutely, and it's
There's
not
nothing in
there.
this movie that came close to that level of fear that you just described in like a sentence and a half.
And one of the other big things that it got a passing comment from Scatman Crothers, love that name, um, but is a much bigger part of the book, is that the evil force that eventually overtakes Jack isn't this whole spiritual weird thing that the movie portends that it is. It's the hotel. Scatman Crothers says, you know, some buildings have the shining just like some people do. Again, a passing comment in the movie, but one of the central themes of the book is that it's not just these weird spirits that were sat there because of the Indian burial ground. It's that this actual building is what's evil, because the building represents the alcoholism, which you don't get as much of in the film because they're really leaning on the whole ghosts narrative, which is
Mhm.
fine. I understand that's easier to literally show, but you lose some of it. And it also then changes the ending. So
Yeah.
just to jump ahead a little bit, and I'm sorry I'm talking a lot. I promise I'll stop soon. Um, the movie ends with Jack Nicholson getting lost in the maze, trying to chase down Danny, and then freezing to death. Um, the book ends with Jack Torrance getting lost in the maze and forgetting that one of his key responsibilities that gets brought up in the book several times, that never gets brought up in the movie, is that the main part of his job is to watch over the boiler room, because it's like an old boiler system, and it overheats all the time, and you have to go down there and maintain it. And
Mhm.
that's the main reason they needed someone to be at the hotel
There's
during the
like
closed
one
down
off
period.
scene where Shelley Duvall's character is looking over a boiler, and that is the only time that is
Yep.
brought up.
Yep, that is it. Danny also frequently goes down to the boiler room in the book and gets scared because there's like a furnace there that looks really scary, and like
Home Alone style.
shouts at him kind of thing. Yeah, pretty much. Um, anyway, so Jack Torrance in the book forgets that he's been so busy trying to kill his family that he forgot to maintain the boiler room, and he sprints back into the hotel after he manages to get out of the maze instead of going to go chase down his family. But it's too late. The boiler is already overheated. It started a big fire, and the book ends with the hotel exploding and killing him. And that's meant to represent him getting engulfed by his alcoholism and losing that battle. But again, you don't get that in the movie. There the main
So
symbolism of the book is kind of lost in this.
so clearly Stephen King had such a deeper grasp on this story, obviously than Stanley Kubrick did, who wrote this screenplay while they were filming. Um, wrote, a lot, big chunks of the story while they were filming, and the sets and everything were designed around what he was writing in real time. I get that the story of The Shining from the book is this very deep, very layered, introspective by King that just from you like talking about it for 2 minutes makes me want to read this book terribly badly. Awful grammar sentence. I'm sorry. Um, none of that shows in the movie, and I don't want to give the movie credit where it doesn't earn it. So like The Martian is my favorite book I've ever read. I love that story to death. I think it's beautifully written, super funny, just very deep characters, excuse me. And the movie doesn't quite get there, but I don't hold the movie up higher because the story from the book is so good. And I get what, like, portraying that or projecting that onto the movie because you've read the story and you know the background and you can add those layers and that knowledge while you watch it from that past material. But just watching it blind without reading the book, without seeing it before, you get none of that watching the movie. And that is why, in my mind, this isn't all that great of a movie. I don't really care for this all that much. The biggest thing I love is Jack Torrance's character, and that's really the only thing I really like about this.
I also love Shelley Duvall's acting in this. I think she does a phenomenal job of being terrified. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
That's like the only thing she has.
it's a very simple role that she does probably better than anyone else I've ever seen in a horror movie. Like,
Oh yeah.
I know there's a stereotype of like, oh, the actress is there to give the horror scream and that's it. Um, her character is, I think, the peak of that. It's still a stereotype, don't get me wrong, but it's perfectly done. And the acting, I think, all around was very, very good, and the characters and the casting in this was just perfect.
Yeah, I would say from technical standpoints all around, as
Mhm.
most Kubrick
Oh yeah.
films are, great. The cinematography was wonderful. I thought the
Mhm.
score for this was excellent.
Oh, unbelievable,
I know, so
unbelievable.
good.
Just it was electric, like it was an electric organ. And what was I forgot to write it down. It was like nails on a chalkboard at certain points when it
Yeah.
really got tense, and I was just that hit me so much harder than really what was going on in the scene. Like the score made that movie scary.
One other thing I would like to add from the book, that I so wish was in this movie is so when Shelley Duvall goes down to the Great Hall to confront Jack with the baseball bat because
Hmm.
she's scared, um, and then she like back up the stairwell with Jack like taunting her basically or egging her on or whatever you want to say.
Just before you go on, that scene was my favorite in the movie.
It's a great scene. Now I'm gonna make it even better for you, or tell you what it could have been. In the book, she doesn't go downstairs with a baseball bat. She goes downstairs with a polo mallet. And in the book, Jack Torrance gets the polo mallet away from her and beats the shit out of her going up those steps
Wow.
while doing all the things Jack Nicholson was already doing.
His like monologue.
Yeah, like not verbatim, obviously, but he's like giving her gruff while also like
Mhm.
I think she like breaks a leg and like breaks an arm, and that's what makes the
Wow.
escape later on even more terrifying. And in fact, he never has an axe in the book. He breaks down the door with that polo mallet. Like
I will
that's
say
how
that.
crazy and aggressive it. Like, granted, that's maybe a tad out of the realm of what could actually happen, but that's what I'm saying. There's bits and pieces missing that make this that could have made this the masterpiece some people talk about it as is. Don't get me wrong, I really like this movie. I know which is a point that we're going to disagree on because I know you don't care for it, but it's because I have some of the filler for these holes you keep mentioning.
Right, right.
And if it just had some of the like that basic thing of switching it from being scared, defenseless, Shelley Duvall with a bat that she never seriously uses nor even holds correctly, into being actually a very strong character, very strong Wendy in the book, who just gets disarmed and then fucked up. Like that's a big difference thematically.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I don't care for this film. I just am disappointed with how much potential it lets get away.
It does. It's a
Um,
shame.
I would love to see how different this movie would be if it wasn't Stanley Kubrick directing. Um, I honestly would love to see a remake of this, although I can't imagine that being well received just because of how much this has been ingrained in pop culture and just how many people love this movie to death. And it's my mom was talking about it like it was a cornerstone of her childhood. Like it's something that she said she thinks about to this day in like certain rooms and in certain situations. Like she'll get scared at a bank because it reminds her of a room from The Shining that she saw 40 years ago. um and she was saying like, oh, you'll carry this movie with you throughout your adult life. And I was like, I guarantee you I won't, but I would love to have that experience because I want to have that experience with this movie. I was going into this and not with the expectations like this would be an all-time favorite movie of mine, just that it would portray this story that I've known from a distance just super well. It would portray it, and I would get a connection to these characters and see this deep dive into Jack Torrance's collapse. And it doesn't really get past surface level, in my mind. And it was disappointing.
I can see I've heard similar things from people too. I could see some aspects of why it might hold up for people in last with people. I think one of the
Mhm.
biggest things, which is actually a point I was going to make anyway, that might make it so stuck in people of our parents' generation's age is that the set work feels
Mhm.
so true to the time period it was shot in, which you don't always get from horror films. A lot of times they'll be like dingy old cabins in the wood or like some old decrepit mansion or something. No, this was like super modern for the time in terms of its layout, like the super vibrant colors, all the weird furniture, the tacky
Right.
wallpaper, the weird carpeting. Like it was kind of fun to look at because that shit looks terrible, but it was like in style, which is hilarious. But also like I could see why you might have like that the carpet used for the hallway.
It
When that Danny's
Yeah.
going, that's a super famous carpet.
Oh, yeah.
And
You
I
see it everywhere now.
Yeah, and I bet if you saw this movie when you were like first watching horror movies when you're like, I don't know, 15 or 16 or I guess because that was the 70s and 80s. You can't just like watch a Netflix R-rated film on your laptop without your parents knowing like you can now. Then like I could see how with just how modern and current it felt, hairstyles, outfits, everything. I
Mhm.
could see how it could sit with you, but yeah, it certainly I don't think about it when I'm at a bank. I can't think of the last time I was at a bank.
I'm right there with you. I genuinely don't know that answer. But like you said, like with the lighting, when was the last time you saw a horror movie that was brightly, vividly lit? I'm sure there's a lot more now, but especially in 1980, that's unheard of. And I think that's why it was so effective because it lowered a lot of people's guards watching this movie. Like you don't expect it to be as I don't want to say scary because it wasn't scary. It was it just creepy is what I saw and have seen people say about it, and I think that's very spot on. And you just don't expect that from the way that movie was shot.
I am with you. I definitely feel like I had something else to say and don't know what it is, so I guess we can move towards wrapping up
Yeah,
the
I mean,
Shining discussion. Anything else you want to say about it?
it's a Stanley Kubrick movie. It's has a very Stanley Kubrick feel. The things that he does well, he did very well in this. I just think, writing a script as you're shooting a movie, I can't say has ever been a recipe for success. And I think that was a big issue with this. And I just, yeah, final thoughts, final feelings. I am just disappointed with it.
Fair enough. Watch it because it's in the ether of cinema and filmmaking, but don't make this your first Stanley Kubrick film.
Oh, no, no, no. What would be your Stanley Kubrick recommendation?
2001: A Space Odyssey, I feel like is really acceptable, or sorry, accessible. Like A Clockwork Orange is tougher because it's so abstract and weird and gross at parts. Doctor Strangelove is really good, but black and white might throw a lot of people off. And again, it's a comedy, but it's a very subversive comedy, so it might not also be as acceptable or accessible. So probably a space 2001: A Space Odyssey, but I think actually my first one might have been Full Metal Jacket. I think I might have watched that before 2001.
My first one was Clockwork Orange, which
It's a
that was getting thrown into the ring of Stanley Kubrick pretty quick.
Yeah,
But I love that movie.
it's a
I
great
really
movie.
appreciate Clockwork Orange, but I have to say Full Metal Jacket just because that is so much up my alley, and I just
You're such a war
appreciate it
movie
on
guy.
so many. Yeah, it's just such a well done, just quintessential Vietnam War. I don't want to say propaganda, but experience. I guess I'll say.
Oh, it's definitely not propaganda. They don't have a great time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What's your favorite Kubrick film?
Ooh, I'd have to say Full Metal Jacket. I really like Doctor Strangelove. Um, I I don't think I've ever seen 2001. I think that's still on the
Really?
list of like movies I'm extremely disappointed to tell people I haven't seen just because I've never gotten around to it. And that might be like peak of shamefully haven't seen.
You should definitely watch it because it's again gonna be one where if you don't look up anything afterwards, I will have to fill in gaps for you.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
but it's also very, very good. I
yeah.
love that movie. Just visually, it's just beautiful.
Which is
Uh,
why I want to watch it so bad.
I would uh, 2001 such a great fucking movie. Paths of Glory, I think, is a very underrated Stanley Kubrick. Now, that might really be up there for me, but I will probably settle in on Doctor Strangelove.
Paths of Glory is something that has kind of passed me by. And then once, Kirk Douglas passed away this year, I kind of went back to look at things that I would know him from. And seeing clips from that movie make me really, really excited to watch that.
It's really good. I think again, it's like kind of an understated Stanley Kubrick film, and I think you'll get that when you watch it.
Hmm.
And I really love that movie. I think it's phenomenal. Also, if you get a chance, The Killing, which is the movie that came out, the Kubrick's film that came out right before it, also a very like non-Kubrickian Kubrick film, is also very good.
Hmm.
Yeah, again, just doesn't feel like him at all. It feels very, very vintage, which it is. It's from 1956, but like, it's a good movie. I think you would enjoy.
Yeah. Do you want to give this one a rating?
Yeah, I will give it. I'll give it 3 out of. Wait, are we doing it out of 4 or 5? I forget.
Out of 5.
Out of 5, I'll give it 3 out of 5.
Really?
Yeah,
Huh. Okay. I'll give it a 2.5 out of 5.
fair. That's kind of where I figured you'd go. I want to give it a little bit of extra because I think the acting's really good in it, and it does carry a marquee name in the director's category, which I'm not saying makes it better, but I'm saying makes it probably more worth a watch, especially if you're a completionist when it comes to director repertoire. Um, if I had to go strictly based on quality of film itself, I'm probably in between 2.5 and 3, but the names involved, I'll give it a 3.
I genuinely was thinking about giving it a 3, and I just thought you were going to give it in the 4 range, in the 4 spectrum somewhere. So
No, no, I know what it is.
fair enough.
You know
Fair
what I
enough.
mean?
Yeah.
All right, then let's get into Death of Stalin. Had you seen this before your watch the other day?
I saw it when I was less than fully mentally available and did not remember much of it. So it's kind of like a fresh watch, but I kind of also knew the style and tone that I was getting into.
All right, so 2000, sorry, Death of Stalin came out in 2017. It is an Armando Iannucci film. It was written and directed by him, along with a co-writing credit for David Schneider, not Dan Schneider, David Schneider, and 5 additional people, which is just too many to read. It has a huge cast. It's definitely an ensemble. I don't think anyone you could pick out as being a true leading actor. But we get such names as Jeffrey Tambor, Steve Buscemi, Michael Palin, and then a bunch of people whose names I don't know, but you might. Adrian McLaughlin, Olga Kurilenko, Tom Brook, Patty Considine. I'm so sorry to everyone involved in this. It was not nominated for any Oscars. Oh yeah, forgot about him. But it was not nominated for any Academy Awards, but it was nominated for 2 BAFTA Awards, Best Screenplay Adapted and Outstanding British Film of the Year. It where was I going with this? Oh yeah, it had an estimated budget of 13 million and brought in 24.6 million box office. And that is all the technical stuff I have. And a runtime of 107 minutes. This movie I have in one of my notes for this movie is this script must have been huge because it is nothing but dialogue.
Yeah, it genuinely was not something that I was expecting. Both the style of humor was a little off from what I was expecting, but just non-stop dialogue was just oof. Like I didn't mind it, but it definitely was points where I kind of lost focus because there's only so much conversation listening you can do in 2 hours. And that I like it's not something I'm holding against the movie. I'm holding it against myself for not giving this the absolute undivided attention I know it deserves.
It's great. So Armando Iannucci, as I just mentioned, this film was nominated for several BAFTA awards, which is the British Oscars. Basically, he is British, and this carries a very British sentimentality when it comes to comedy and discourse. So that being the case, which is one of the reasons Michael Palin's in it, which made me so happy. I love Michael Palin. If you're unaware of who Michael Palin is, he's from Monty Python, and a few other British comedies like A Fish Called Wanda, which is phenomenal movie. So it was really nice to see him in here. But it's subtle. No, it's not like this. All right, I'll do it this way. This is like the British version of The Interview, that Seth Rogen movie where him and James Franco go to interview Kim Jong-un. That would be like the American version of this movie, where it's like big jokes played for big laughs. This is a lot of dialogue that's played for chuckles and acknowledgement of comedy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I felt like watching this, there were more snorts than there was actual laughter. Just
Exactly.
because the biggest note I have on here is just the visual humor that is just I don't want to say it's Edgar Wright levels of visual humor, but it's just they set things up so well that it's just natural. Everything is just naturally funny. It's not, set up punchline. It's just naturally, it's just the situations that they're in and just the way these characters act and how they portray themselves is fucking hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, you got a bunch of guys in suits standing around and unconscious, having pissed himself, Stalin lying on the floor, and you got the one guy like, so I'm the only one yelling a piss then. Like that's hilarious.
Oh,
But
when they call for the doctor and the doctor's just out walking his dog, and you just see this truck drive up behind him in the shot, and all these soldiers get out. This woman points at the doctor. He notices and just starts this like brisk little jog with his dog as these soldiers just run him down. I don't know what it was about that scene. Just the visual of this essentially 90-year-old man just jogging away from Russian soldiers was fucking killed me. Oh, so good.
So good. So this film is about exactly what you think it is. It is about the death of Stalin and how the government officials, or at least high-ranking members of the government of the Soviet Union, deal with that. Um, it is a comedy based upon the concept that everything is so ludicrous. The amount of power everyone wields is ludicrous. The keeping up with appearances is ludicrous. The um, order and procedure behind everything is ludicrous. And that's what feeds into a lot of the comedic nature of this. It's like a lot of comedic moments come out of this because someone is said something that benefits like their personal interest or reflects better their personal interests, but goes against Stalin or is sounding unfavorable towards Stalin or against Mother Russia, and someone calls them out on it, and they have to like phrase what they just said in a more like pro Russia or pro Stalin facet, and that ends up being played for laughs. But that's probably I would guess relatively accurate how it was, because one of my notes here is I want to find it. Man, no one gives a fuck about anything that's happening. like like when Khrushchev has to plan out the funeral, he's just fucking mad that he's like not
Yeah.
doing other shit. Like no one fucking cares.
It's just so funny that you were kind of touching on this. Just a movie based around the death of Stalin. The death of Stalin is the least important like plot point of this movie.
Oh
Just
yeah.
like, yeah, they care because he is dying, but him dying is the least cared about aspect of that.
It's really just like the starter's pistol for all this
Mhm.
ridiculousness. Most of which was probably happening already. They were just bracing for when this moment was going to happen. Um, I like that this film doesn't have anyone trying to do accents. I find that really annoying, and greatly prefer when you're like, look, we know
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Russia. We understand it's supposed to be Russia. We don't think that there's actually like an Italian man from New York in the Russian government. Like we understand that Steve Buscemi is Steve Buscemi, but he's supposed to be Nikita Kucherov. Like that's fine, or Nikita Khrushchev. I always forget which one it is. Doesn't matter.
Khrushchev.
Khrushchev.
Now I'm second guessing myself, but it doesn't
Eh,
matter.
Russia doesn't matter. But
Russian heads of state. Who cares?
so yeah, I mean, what do you think about the whole natural accents just come as you are?
I definitely appreciate it. In a drama where you're trying to, you know, immerse yourself into the narrative, I can appreciate it more, but it's never been a major factor. Unless it's, poorly done, then it's just detrimental. Um, but for comedy like this, being able to have that comedic timing where you don't have to deal with actors having to force accents makes it just a streamlined process, makes it so much easier. And honestly, I think it helps make funnier phrases and funnier lines funnier. God, I'm bad with words.
No, no worries.
But yeah, I appreciate that they didn't force anything.
Agreed. I wrote down that everyone seems to be super incompetent while also very duplicitous. Because everyone, it's true. Everyone, some more than others. Like I wrote down also here. I love this version of Dick Cheney. because Barry, whatever the fuck his name is like so Dick Cheney. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
Especially since I watched Vice, the recent Vice movie, not too long ago. It was, the was it juxtaposition was
yeah.
very, very hubris.
But like you have characters like him who seem like very on top of things, but then you have characters like Jeffrey Tambor's character who's like a fucking idiot, you know?
Oh God, him playing an idiot is just such a natural character for him.
I know, I feel so bad saying that, but it's true.
But yeah, like that opening scene with Berea where he's the first one on the scene, and then as they knock on the door to come in, he's like moving around the room, positioning himself to look the most casual and distraught. There's so many golden scenes in this, and just perfectly, I don't know if it's the acting, if it's the writing, if it's a mixture of both, but just everything comes together so perfectly.
Oh yeah, I mean like the scene you were just talking about with all the fucking keys. like that's hilarious.
And it's, there's nothing ridiculous happening where it's out of the realm of possibility. Like it's not past that oh God, I'm forgetting another phrase, but it's not outside of expectations of what could actually be happening. Like you could totally see a paranoid Joseph Stalin needing 7 keys to get into a single, honestly, easily broken into just desk where he keeps everything.
Yeah, that would have taken anyone who was trying to get in very shockingly little time. This movie is very much so in Armando Iannucci's wheelhouse. If you know anything about his history of screenwriting, this fits perfectly into it. He also made In the Loop in 2009. He was the creator of the series Veep, which is a great HBO series. I highly recommend. So this is certainly very much so. What?
He has I think it's Cloud9, a new show on HBO that just came out starring
Avenue
dude from
5.
House, Hugh Laurie. Avenue 5. Wow, Cloud9, Avenue 5. Good one.
That's okay. I said Avenue Q to my mom when I was trying to think of what it was. And she was like, "Nope, that's not that." And I was like, "Yeah, I got it."
Have you seen any of that yet?
I have not. I keep meaning to, and then keep
Right.
just not doing it.
Yeah, like every time I log into HBO to watch it, I remember that I'm in the middle of watching The Wire on HBO, and it's just like I can't do 2 on the same platform.
Yeah, I'm currently showing Cal the Wire on HBO right now, and it's just like I'm gonna watch that instead. And Insecure comes back tonight, y'all. If you guys watch Insecure, it's a great show. Highly recommend. Anyway, this movie's tough to break down into its finer points because the plot is, I'll actually say, kind of monotonous in a way, but in like a good way. Like it's consistent. It's everyone trying to do this one thing: gain power in Russia after the death of Stalin, and that's the entirety of the movie. So it's tough for Cora and I to probably really sit here and break down like individual plot points without getting into the super nitty gritty of what's happening in this film because it's almost entirely dialogue. And again, the common thread throughout the entire movie is the same as it is 10 minutes in. Everyone's trying to get power after Stalin dies. So in that respect, wanted to bring up a couple of I'll say bigger picture points. I think I think that the gaggle of government leadership dudes trying to all carry Stalin's body over to his bed and just being fuck awful about it was like a really great metaphor for the quality of leadership and how the rest of this movie is going to go.
Just like through I don't know if it was the Kremlin or like his personal house, but just amongst all these people, just 6-7 men carrying a dead body just haphazardly throughout the house.
Because they forgot to unlock the door to the bedroom before they picked him up, so they had to go the long way. It was ridiculous. Like it was, and then like they forgot to get some guys out of the way, so like 2 dudes had to have the dead body of Stalin roll over them. Like it was hilarious. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, these are like the 8. I don't know how many dudes were there. The 8 most powerful men in all of Russia. and they can't do anything.
The note I have on that scene is that the two dudes who are in the most power and who are in the, I guess, the two best positions to gain control of the country, Steve Buscemi and Berea, I forget the actor's name, are arguing over who gets the head and who gets the feet, which are both the least important things to carry because they are both the lightest, and you can watch them as they carry them. They are putting in the absolute least amount of work. I just thought that was very, like, it's one of those visual jokes that no one brings it up. It's not a punchline for anything. You just notice it and laugh because it's so fitting to these characters.
Oh, I know. The jokes were so well tailored. Now, what the fuck do
Um,
I know about funerals? I also have
or
here.
when they're
No, go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, you go.
When they're at the funeral and they're trying to switch spots so that they're
Yeah,
better, like they can talk to people better, and they're just like
we can make it
they're
look like part of the
still
ceremony.
standing as guards. They're just stepping back and forth, and then the one guy telling him, "I don't want to say it because I am so bad at retelling these jokes that it's going to ruin it for if you ever go back to watch it." So that's a great scene. I'm just going to leave it at that.
I can respect it. At the same time with that, another big picture moment or big idea moment maybe that I had was when Khrushchev changes the orders and lets the citizens of Russia use the trains again and regrants access to Moscow. And then there's like a huge killing scene where like 1,500 people die.
Right.
Um, I thought that was also a great representation of how this brutality is like partly, they're joking around about it and like they're making light of it because these guys just don't give a fuck. Not because it's not serious, just because they don't give a fuck. But like, these are people who are like debating about actions that are going to be killing thousands of people because it's Russia. It doesn't take much to kill a person in Russia. Um, and that's like the actual consequence of all their wheeling and dealing. Like
Mhm.
the 1,500 people they were willing that died in the streets of Moscow were like they were cool with that.
Yeah, nobody cared. Like it was something that was brought up, but nobody actually gave a shit at any point.
Yeah, no, mildly inconvenient at worst.
Well, it's a good thing that there's no way to use that as representation of what's going on in politics at all. So,
Yeah, why wouldn't they just issue a stay-at-home order?
yeah.
Did you have any of those kind of type of moments that stuck out for you in this?
Um, man, nothing that I have notes on. Um, it's hard to go back and think of those moments because they were downplayed so much. It's not something that was focused on and I, you know, by you know, by what they were trying to do that was forgettable.
Yeah,
Um,
like we said earlier, this movie is dialogue heavy, so it moves a mile a minute, and the plot is constant throughout the film. So, like, only reason I was looking for those moments is because I'd seen the movie already, and
mhm.
I knew I wasn't going to be writing down these fucking jokes.
Yeah. So I guess so just looking over my notes now, Vasily's character is like every other note, just me writing down how fucking funny he is throughout the movie. So far and away my favorite character.
Oh my god, he was amazing. These hairy chimps in lab coats are stealing my father's brain to give to the Americans.
And just like him coming in, popping off with the gun, just going crazy.
Just
Oh,
immediately. Oh,
just every scene he was in immediately took it over for me.
the fact that they coordinated when the plane would fly over to interrupt his speech, that was amazing.
Oh, it's so good.
Like that level shit, man. Oh my god, it was amazing. Also, like the whole thing about how he's trying to keep secret that he let the entire Russian hockey team die is
And then
so good.
and then immediately when it's, a factor again. Barry is just like, yeah, I know about the hockey team. How do I not know about the hockey team? Come on.
So, th- th- uh, again, we can keep going with the little stuff just because there's so much of it. So
Right.
instead, I want to pivot. I guess move towards the slight wrapping up of things. I want to pivot to the final like act. I guess, although it's a pretty short segment of the film, when it gets serious.
Mhm.
Like the last 10 minutes of the movie when they get ready to and then do kill Berea. Not really funny
No, no, no,
at
no.
all. There's like I think one quick joke in there from the head of the army whose name I forget. Um after
Jonathan Isaacs.
Jonathan Isaacs right after they kill Berea. But like that whole like pulling him into the bathroom thing outside of Michael Palin's shit joke. I'm gonna go drop a Quebec. Um but like especially when you see like Berea who's been wheeling and dealing, like he's been running the show behind the scenes for the entirety of this film, begging not to be shot, like begging. It's not funny, and it's a. I think it's a really nice way to end the film, or not nice way. I think it's a very effective way to end the film, but it is very harshly juxtaposed to the previous hour and a half of it.
Huge tonal shift.
What do you think of it?
Um, I don't want to say I didn't care for it because I thought it was still well done. I It wasn't my favorite part of the film because, I'm there for comedy and that's, what I've been sitting through for an hour and a half, but I still enjoyed how well it was done and I did find it satisfying to watch. And that's really for what it was and what it did, I feel like that's a pretty fair compliment towards the quality of that final segment, that final act.
Yeah, this is supposed to be, I would think, um, a representation of who Berea. I was getting this wrong. Berea is catching up to him. He's
Mm,
been the guy that's been doing this, like mainly him, to other people. He's been the guy that's had them pulled out of whatever their realm typically is, pulled into something like a barn, read off a very haphazardly written reason for why you are about to be killed, and then very, very unceremoniously being killed.
mhm.
And he's been the orchestrator of a bunch of these types of killings of people being thrown in gulags and other such types of camps and whatnot. And it was him kind of getting a just desserts, which certainly you can make the point of most of these people getting a similar treatment because there's no winners in that bunch. But it's also meant to show just the brutality of what this is all about. You get glimpses of where the brutality is in this film. There's a scene of Berea like just decking a dude and who's tied up in a chair and telling a soldier who comes in, don't worry about him. His ears are full of blood. Like that's rough. Um, but I think that last note that this film leaves you on is one of like, this shit was all jokes because these people are ridiculous, but everything they're talking about is very serious and they
Mhm.
are bad people who do terrible things and then burn you in the street.
Yeah, it's one of those. It was a very sobering end to the film that, again, I don't know if that's what I usually like when I watch comedies, but with how lightly they treaded on or how lightly they treated the rest of this seemingly very somber topic, of the death of Joseph Stalin, I thought it was a nice balancing point to some degree.
What would the comedic ending of this movie look like?
Um, Stalin waking up,
Well,
like
like
honestly,
with his
like
scalp open?
yeah, I don't know, like genuinely, just like something happening where like everything goes back to square one because all of this was for nothing or something like that. I don't know.
I haven't looked it up, so I don't know like what is historically accurate to the film. I'm hoping it's most of it because that would make the jokes even better. Um, but I would like to know what happened next in terms of actual Russian history to make a joke based on that. But if not that, then I don't know. Maybe Jeffrey Tambor taking off his clearly a wig.
So I did look this up. Not everything, but the major points. And you know what? It was pretty damn close. The large plot points throughout this, the large moves were definitely based off of actual events in history. And then Steve Buscemi's character was, the I want to say it was the prime minister. I don't remember the exact title of what it was back in the USSR, but he was the leader for a good chunk of time until natural course of things happened and he was removed and replaced.
Speaking of things that happened, the 1950 plane crash in Sverdlovsk that killed all 19 onboard USSR hockey players did in fact happen, and Vasily Stalin did in fact downplay the seriousness of the crash and recruit replacements. um, Jason Isaacs wears fewer medals than real life Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov because Armando Iannucci thought the real number of medals was too ridiculous. Um, yeah, Stalin was apparently a crazy alcoholic. Sorry, Vasily Stalin was apparently an alcoholic, just as it mentions in the film. That ended up killing him by the age of 40.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's serious alcoholism.
yeah, ain't that some fucking shit? Um, yeah, there's a bunch more. This looks to be fairly accurate, which again doesn't surprise me given who Armando Iannucci is. But yeah,
Uh,
any other thoughts on this?
I will say, as much as we both love this, it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea. The first time I attempted watching this, I watched it with my roommates, and all three of them asked me to change it at some point because they just were not about the humor, the style of humor, which is what it is. But we both enjoyed it. We both, I assume, strongly recommend it.
Yeah,
Um,
you have to be a fan of dialogue to like this movie.
yeah.
And as
Uh,
much as having, I
yeah.
guess, a context for the time period might help, I know I don't have one, or maybe like a general enjoyment of history might help.
Mm.
I don't think you really need it.
Which we both have.
Yeah, but I don't think you need it for this. I mean,
No.
it's mostly about how these people are ridiculous.
Hmm.
But all right, what would you rate it, friend?
I'm a little torn. I think, I feel like my my brain is telling me to give it 3.5 stars, but I feel like that's not quite just. So I'm going to give it 4.
I've been having the same internal debate since I asked the question. So since you gave it 4, I will also give it.
Nice.
Yeah, I
We're
was with the
we're
same thing.
seemingly on the same page throughout most of this. So,
Yeah, I think so. I think we've got pretty similar sentimentalities about films here, friend.
oh, who would have thought?
We will make our picks for next Monday by the Thursday episode, so we can announce them then. Um, Corwin, do you have any other thoughts about anything?
Um, have you seen the sequel to The Shining, Doctor Sleep?
I have.
Came out this past year. I haven't, and kind of just found out about it. What do you think?
Do not watch it. It's not good.
Okay,
I
we'll
saw
end
it in theaters, and boy, is it disappointing.
really.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just not good.
I saw Ewan McGregor was the headliner, and that got me excited. So I will shut down all hype after that.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you find it somewhere for free and you want to like check it out, sure. But I'll tell you, it is nice for one thing. Um, at some point in the movie, elder Danny Torrance has to go back to the Overlook Hotel because in this universe, the Overlook Hotel didn't blow up. Burned down. So he has to venture back there. And the shots they use of Danny going back to the Overlook, which is now abandoned, is actually all the exact same shots that they used at the very beginning of The Shining.
I like that.
Just color graded to fit the color grading of Dr. Sleep.
I can appreciate that quite a lot.
Yeah, it was really actually quite cool to see. And they used some of the other footage from the original film as well for some scenes while they were at the hotel. So yeah, it was cool for that, but outside of that, it's just not good, man. Out of 5, I give it 1.
That's not good.
It's not
very
good.
much not good.
No.
All right. I have no idea what I'm going to pick for next week, so I'm definitely going to have to think long and hard.
Yeah. Also, for anyone who enjoys movies, Amazon Prime is now offering films that either would have been currently in theaters right now since all theaters are closed, or that would have very recently departed from the theaters. So they have very, very current movies available for rent. Which I'm debating maybe picking one of those just for like a modern film. If one of us does, then that's where you'd be able to find it. Films that would have been in theaters are currently renting on Amazon for like $20. Films that would have just left theaters being rented out right now for $6. My girlfriend and I just watched Just Mercy the other day, which was not very good, but is recent. So if anyone else is looking for more stuff to watch, that's a really good resource that's available right now.
Neat
Indeed. That's all I got.
Yeah,
all right.
check this out.
Well, if you want to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at JuicingPod. And if you want to hit us up via email, you can do so at juicethenumbers@gmail.com. And until Thursday, y'all have a good one.
Bye.